I thought it was just another Sunday. Morning light leaked through the blinds in thin gold strips touching the kitchen floor like it was tracing boundaries I hadn't yet dared to cross. The coffee maker clicked off, leaving a hollow hum. For a few seconds, I stood by the sink, steam curling around my face, thinking maybe this would be the day everything turned. The day I stopped existing only between other people's tempers. Upstairs, a door slammed and the quiet collapsed. Amber's voice drifted down the hall, sing-song but sharp. "You promised you'd drive me." She said it like a fact, not a question. I looked at the clock. The digital numbers glowed 9:07. My interview downtown was at 11. I never promised, I said, still facing the counter. "I have my interview." She appeared in the doorway, phone in one hand, iced coffee in the other, oversized sunglasses pushing her hair back. "You can do that later. This is family." I turned to her. "They don't reschedule job interviews because your sister wants lip gloss." She sighed, tapping her nails on the cup. "You're always so dramatic." From upstairs came the familiar voice that made air heavy. "What's the yelling?" Our father's footsteps followed, slow, deliberate, each one louder than reason. When he appeared at the bottom of the stairs, the sunlight seemed to dim around him. He still wore yesterday's shirt collar, open sleeves, half rolled a mug in his hand. "What's going on now?" he asked, though it wasn't curiosity, just warning. "Nothing," I said. "I was just explaining I can't take her to the mall." Amber flicked her wrist toward me. "She's being selfish again." He stared at me, jaw working. "Why can't you ever help when you're asked?" "Because I've waited months for this interview," I said. "It's important." He set the mug down too hard. Coffee jumped over the rim. "You think you're better than your family because of some silly job I just won a chance," I said. He stepped closer. "You always want, never give." I could feel the heat rising behind my eyes. "I give everything," I whispered. The room tightened. Even the hum of the fridge sounded nervous. He looked at Amber, then back at me. "You will take her," he said evenly. "No," I replied softer than I meant. His lips curved into that dangerous smile that usually came before things broke. "What did you say? No?" The silence that followed stretched until it snapped. He grabbed the mug again, turned it in his hand as if weighing it, then let it fall. It hit the tile and shattered, scattering pieces that glinted under the kitchen light. Coffee splattered across the counter, staining the only good blazer I owned. My mother appeared in the doorway, dish towel in hand, eyes already tired. "Martin, stop," she said, but it sounded rehearsed, not pleading. He didn't hear her. He was already reaching for the wooden chair by the table. The scrape of its legs against tile shrieked through the room, and something inside me locked up. Amber froze, eyes wide but unreadable. My mother stood still, towel clutched to her chest. The air felt thick enough to drown in. I heard my heartbeat more than I felt it. He lifted the chair slightly enough to show he could. The sunlight caught the edge of its backrest. My voice came out thin. "Please, don't!" There was a blur of movement, a sound that wasn't quite a crash, but wasn't silence either, a rush of air and the sudden taste of metal in my mouth. Then everything went bright and hollow, like the world blinked and forgot its sound. When hearing returned, it came in fragments, the drip of spilled coffee, the faint hum of the refrigerator, Amber's shallow breathing, my own pulse pounding behind my eyes. I was on the floor, one hand against the cabinet, the other shaking uncontrollably. Across the room, the chair lay sideways, one leg split near the base. My mother whispered something I couldn't understand. My father's voice cut through, low and harsh. "Look what you made me do." I didn't answer. "Couldn't?" Amber turned away. "I'm going to be late," she said, stepping around me. The door closed behind her. The sound made my stomach twist. He took a deep breath, shoulders rising. "You see what happens when you don't listen," he said. I wanted to stand, but the floor felt like it was still moving. My mother's voice was barely audible. "Enough, Martin. Stay out of this," he snapped. The towel dropped to the floor. He turned back to me. "You think the world wants you? You think that company will hire you when they see what you are?" I forced air into my lungs. "I'm still going," I said. He stared like he hadn't heard me right. What, I'm still going? His expression twisted, part disbelief, part fury. My mother stepped between us, hand on his arm. Please, she said, but he pulled away. I pushed myself up, gripping the edge of the counter. The room tilted, steadied. You walk out that door, he said, and don't come back. The words hit harder than anything else. For a moment, I almost believed they could keep me here forever. But then, I remembered the way his voice had sounded when he lifted that chair like ownership, and something in me hardened. I picked up my bag from the floor, wiped coffee from the strap. My blazer was ruined, but I didn't care. My hand found the doorknob. The metal was cool against my palm. Behind me, he said again softer, "No one wants you." I didn't look back. Outside, the light was so bright it hurt. The sound of cicadas filled the air. The neighborhood looked unchanged. Lawns trimmed flags, still children's bikes on driveways, but everything inside me had shifted. I walked down the porch steps, shoes clicking on the concrete. The neighbor across the street paused with her watering can. Our eyes met. She opened her mouth like she might say something, then didn't. I kept walking. Each breath hurt a little less than the one before. At the corner, I stopped, looked back once. The curtains in the front window moved slightly as if someone had been watching. Then, stillness. I turned away. The bus stop was empty except for a discarded newspaper fluttering in the breeze. I sat on the bench, fingers trembling as I tried to smooth the wrinkles in my resume. My phone buzzed. A text from Amber Dad's furious. "You'd better apologize before he locks you out." I stared at the words until they blurred, then deleted the message without replying. Across the street, wind lifted a few dry leaves and sent them tumbling down the asphalt. The world carried on like nothing had happened. My reflection in the glass of the bus shelter looked like someone else, pale dazed but still standing. A bus roared past without stopping, scattering dust and heat around me. I stood as it faded into the distance. The next one would come soon. 90 minutes until the interview. I adjusted my bag, squared my shoulders, and whispered to the empty street, "I'm still going." Somewhere behind me, faint and distant, came the echo of something wooden settling to the floor. Then silence. The night before had felt strangely calm, like the air itself was holding its breath. I stayed up late at my desk, the cheap lamp buzzing faintly as I printed another copy of my resume. The paper curled a little from the heat of the printer edges soft, but it looked clean enough. I laid it on my bed next to the navy blazer I had ironed twice already, smoothing every seam as if the fabric could hide my nervousness. Outside, cicadas droned in the Texas dark, their rhythm steady, hypnotic. The house was quiet except for the television murmuring from the living room where my father sat. That sound always marked the border between peace and danger. When it went mute, it meant he was listening. I moved carefully, soft steps, learned habit. My mother passed by my door at one point, pausing as if to say something, then thought better of it and continued down the hall. The faint smell of detergent from her laundry basket drifted in. For a moment, I let myself imagine what tomorrow could bring. I pictured walking into the tall glass building downtown, my reflection caught in the revolving doors, people greeting me with professional smiles instead of pity. I imagined a desk of my own, maybe near a window, where no one would shout my name unless they needed help with something only I could do. Freedom in my mind looked like fluorescent lights and keycards and a quiet commute. I whispered the interview questions to myself, voice barely above a breath. "Tell us about yourself. I'm someone who learns fast and works harder than people expect. What motivates you? Building something stable. What's your greatest weakness? Believing that being silent keeps peace." The answer slipped out before I could stop it, and I laughed softly at the irony. My reflection in the darkened window stared back pale and serious. "You got this," I told her. She didn't look convinced. At 11, I packed my purse with the Essentials resume folder, lip balm, bus pass, and set my phone alarm. My hands were steady, but my stomach had that hollow feeling, the one that came before storms. Downstairs, the television turned off. A chair scraped against the floor. My body reacted before my brain did, shoulders tightening, breath catching. I counted to 5, waited. Nothing followed. A commercial started playing again, too loud, and the tension broke. I exhaled, half laugh, half sigh. Maybe tomorrow would be different. Maybe everyone would still be asleep when I left. I crawled into bed, pulled the thin blanket up to my chin, and tried to imagine a different kind of morning light. One that didn't come through blinds like prison bars, but through windows I could open whenever I wanted. I thought about what I would say to the interviewer if they asked why I wanted the job, because I need to prove that I'm more than the version of me my family insists on seeing, because I need to earn my way out. I fell asleep somewhere between those thoughts, dreaming of elevators that never stopped at the right floor of doors that opened onto wide, empty rooms full of potential. When my alarm buzzed at 7 Haziran, the sun was already warming the edges of the curtains. I got up before it could repeat, afraid the sound might wake anyone else. In the mirror, my face looked unfamiliar. Hopeful, maybe, or just tired in a new way. I brushed my hair, tied it back, and reached for the blazer. It still smelled faintly of steam. My fingers lingered on the lapel, the fabric cool against my skin. Downstairs, the first noises of the day began: faucet running, fridge door closing, a cabinet shutting harder than necessary. The routine sequence of home always teetering between normal and volatile. I slipped my heels into my bag, deciding to change at the office lobby. Sneakers would be quieter for now. The clock on my nightstand ticked towards 7:15. My stomach twisted, but I forced myself to eat a granola bar anyway. Outside the window, the neighbor's sprinkler turned in slow arcs, scattering sunlight into little rainbows. For a moment, I just watched, thinking about how ordinary beauty could still exist in places that didn't deserve it. My phone buzzed with a notification company reminder for the interview location and time confirmed. Seeing it written out made my pulse jump. This was real. This was happening. Somewhere below, the television clicked on again, volume rising. My father's voice carried faintly through the floorboards as he talked to someone on the phone. His laughter, deep and careless, floated up the stairs. It sounded almost human when you couldn't hear the words. I closed my eyes and inhaled slowly, counting to 3. I wanted to remember this version of the morning, the one before. Before the shouting, before the crash, before the chair. Because in that moment, I still believed calm could last. I picked up my bag, tucked the folder inside carefully, and glanced one last time at the mirror. "You got this," I whispered again. The girl in the glass nodded back with the smallest flicker of faith. Then from downstairs came a dull thud, like something heavy dropped on the tile, and the faint sound of my sister's voice calling for me. The calm cracked but didn't shatter yet. I stood frozen, listening. Another sound followed, soft, impatient, the opening note of the storm I had spent my whole life predicting but never escaping. I squared my shoulders, took one last breath of the false peace, and stepped out of my room. The sound of my sister's voice grew sharper as I reached the bottom of the stairs. She was standing in the kitchen, already dressed, sunglasses perched on her head, though the sunlight barely touched the room. A pink drink from Starbucks sweated onto the counter beside her phone. "You ready?" she asked without looking up. For what I said already knowing. "The mall," she answered, scrolling. "I told the girls we'd meet by 11. You can drop me, go do your little thing, and pick me up after." My little thing. I felt the phrase land in the air like an insult dressed as casual talk. "Amber, I can't," I said, keeping my voice even. "My interview's at 11:30. Downtown." She blinked at me as if she hadn't heard. "So, it's just a job. They'll still be there tomorrow." "I can't move it," I said again. "They scheduled weeks in advance." She rolled her eyes dramatically. "You're acting like it's NASA." Her laughter grated, a high sound meant to provoke. My mother entered, drying her hands on a towel, eyes already weary, as if she'd been listening the whole time. "Just help your sister Claire. It'll save us all an argument." I turned to her. "Mom, please, I can't miss this." "Peace is never free in this house," I said before I could stop myself. The towel stilled in her hands. "Don't start," she said, the edge in her voice familiar, practiced. "You know how your father gets when the morning starts like this. Maybe if everyone stopped giving in to him, mornings wouldn't start like this," I said. Amber snorted. "Here we go again, Miss Martyr." My mother sighed, long and sharp. "Claire, please." "I'm not fighting," I said. "I'm explaining." "You're always explaining," Amber said, still tapping her phone. "Explaining why you can't help, why you're late, why you're special." I could feel my heartbeat climbing into my throat. "Special." "Yeah," she said. You act like the world owes you something because you went to community college and wear blazers. My mother gave her a small look, the kind that said enough, but not really. Amber, stop, she said quietly, but her voice carried no force. The kitchen light flickered once the overhead bulb struggling. I wished it would go out entirely. I just need to get ready, I said, stepping toward the stairs. Amber's voice followed me. I'll tell Dad you refused. He won't like that. The words hit their mark. My stomach dropped even before the echo of his name finished leaving her mouth. Why would you do that? I asked, turning back. Because you're selfish, she said simply. And you need to be reminded who's in charge. Enough, I said louder now. I'm not your chauffeur, and I'm not your excuse for failure, she shot back. You don't even have the job yet. You'll probably bomb like you always do. My mother's hand tightened around the towel. Girls, stop this right now. But Amber was enjoying it, leaning back against the counter with that lazy smirk that mirrored our father's. You talk about leaving like you're some hero escaping captivity, she said. But we both know you'll be right back here by dinner. I felt the heat rise in my face. Not this time, I said. Her smile widened like she'd been waiting for that line. We'll see, she said. Because once Dad hears how you disrespected him, you'll be lucky if you get to leave at all. My mother moved toward the sink, her silence permission disguised as avoidance. I wanted to shout to tell them both how wrong this all was, but the words stuck. The house had a way of swallowing anything that didn't fit its script. You can tell him whatever you want, I said, finally quieter than I meant. But I'm going. Amber tilted her head amused. You think bravery makes you right. It just makes you louder. And cruelty makes you powerful, I said. It makes me practical, she replied. Her phone buzzed a message lighting the screen. They're waiting, she said to herself, then louder. So you driving or not? Not, I said. The single word felt heavy, final. My mother's shoulders tensed. Claire, she said softly, don't make this worse. I'm not making it worse, I said. I'm just refusing to make it easier. The air thickened. Outside, a car door slammed, maybe a neighbor's, but it sounded close. Amber smirked again, the calm, before a storm she knew would destroy me more than her. I'll tell Dad then. She walked past me, perfume sharp in the air. I stood still, watching the staircase shadow stretch across the floor. The sound of her footsteps on the tile faded, followed by the faint creak of the front door. My mother looked at me, expression unreadable. You shouldn't push him, she said quietly. You know he only gets angry when you provoke him. I laughed once bitter. He doesn't need provocation, Mom. He needs obedience, and I'm done giving it. Watch your tone, she said, almost whispering. Or what I asked, but she didn't answer. She just stared at me like she was seeing a stranger. You think you're the only one who suffers, she murmured. We all make sacrifices for this family. No, I said, you all make excuses. The moment stretched between us like a thin wire. Somewhere upstairs, a floorboard creaked. The house seemed to inhale, waiting. My mother folded the towel neatly, placed it on the counter, and left the kitchen without another word. I could hear her footsteps retreating, slow, deliberate, heading toward the back porch, where she always went to pretend she didn't hear what came next. I stood there alone for a heartbeat that felt endless until I heard the heavy sound of the front door opening again. My pulse quickened before I even turned. The rhythm of boots on tile, the unmistakable pause that came before his voice. What's this I'm hearing? His tone already carried accusation, though no one had explained anything yet. Amber must have texted him. Of course she had. I turned slowly to face the doorway, hands trembling, though I kept them at my sides. Nothing I said. Just a misunderstanding. He stepped into the light eyes already narrowing. You refused to take your sister. I swallowed. I have my interview, Dad. It's important. He took one step closer. You think your little job matters more than your family? I think my life matters too, I said before I could stop myself. The air cracked with silence. His jaw tightened, and in that split second before the shouting started, I realized something I'd never said out loud, that no matter how calm the night before had been, this house only knew peace when I surrendered. And this morning, I wasn't surrendering. I had known this rhythm all my life, the way air thickened before words turned heavy, before everything in the room seemed to tilt toward danger. My father's breathing changed first, that quick inhale through the nose that meant he was measuring how far he could push. "You think your life matters too," he repeated quieter this time, which somehow felt worse. His voice always softened before it broke the air. The clock on the wall ticked once, twice. I heard the refrigerator hum, the wind press against the windows. Then the sound stopped meaning anything. It all blurred into one long-held note. My pulse was the only rhythm left. I tried to speak to offer some small bridge back to reason, but the words refused to leave. There was only the sound of movement, fast, unrecognizable, heavy enough to make the air itself jump. A sound like thunder without rain, close and unfinished. My mind didn't register what it was, only the echo that followed. Everything went silent. Silence wasn't empty. It rang in my ears, bright and electric. It made my body vibrate as if the world had swallowed all noise except the inside of my skull. I could taste metal the way you can taste fear before you understand you're afraid. Then the silence cracked. Someone, maybe me, gasped. The next few seconds happened out of order, my mother's voice rising somewhere far away. My sister's quick footsteps retreating, the faint sound of something wooden striking tile. I was aware of light. Too much light. The morning sun had found its way through the blinds and spilled across the floor, and in that glare, everything looked wrong, as though the kitchen belonged to someone else. My hands were shaking, but I didn't feel them. My heartbeat filled the space where words should have been. My father's voice arrived again, not loud anymore, almost calm. "Look what you made me do," he said. Every syllable carried that strange disappointment, the kind that makes you want to apologize even when you've done nothing. My mother answered her tone, thin and breaking. "Martin, stop. Please." The plea barely registered. It sounded rehearsed like a line from an old play we'd performed too many times. I still couldn't move. Time stretched wide and thin, elastic enough that I could see the dust motes hanging midair, frozen in sunlight. The smell of coffee lingered sweet and bitter. I remember thinking absurdly that I would never be able to drink it again without remembering this morning. My throat tightened, but no tears came. Then the sound of his shoes shifting. A pause. The quiet pressure of someone staring. "You see what happens," he said, the tone almost patient. "Every time you push, this is what happens." Each word dropped like a stone into water. The calmness frightened me more than the noise ever had. I heard my own voice next, soft and cracked. "You did this," I whispered. It wasn't defiance. It was fact. The moment the words left my mouth, the air changed again, sharp and thin. He inhaled through his teeth, and I thought, this is the part where I disappear. But he didn't speak. The house did, instead, a distant door slamming, a glass clinking on the counter, the dog barking outside as if it had heard enough. My mother stepped closer. Her perfume, faint and floral, cut through the smell of coffee and fear. "Go upstairs," she said quickly, but her voice wavered. "Go, before it gets worse." Worse. There was always a worse. I wanted to tell her that the worst wasn't what had happened. It was what would stay afterward, the echo, the walking on tiptoe, the knowing that calm never meant safe. I turned toward the hallway, but my legs refused to coordinate. Everything felt distant, like walking underwater. The walls seemed too white, the edges of the room too sharp. My father muttered something I couldn't catch. Then came the heavy thud of his fist meeting the wall. Not me, but close enough that the vibration traveled through the floorboards. The sound ripped through the silence like a warning shot. My mother flinched. "Stop!" she shouted, her voice finally cracking into something human. The air trembled, then quiet again. I focused on breathing. In through the nose, out through the mouth. My chest stung with each inhale. My fingers found the edge of the countertop and held on not for balance, but proof of existence. Somewhere behind me, a picture frame shifted on the wall and fell, landing with a soft snap. It sounded final. No one spoke for a long time. The quiet was the kind that fills your head until you can't tell where the house ends and your heartbeat begins. I counted the seconds in my mind just to keep time from freezing completely. 1, 2, 3, 4, stop, start again. Finally, his voice lower now, rough around the edges. Clean it up. 2 words delivered like an order in a factory. My mother moved first. I heard her collect something from the floor, the faint clink of porcelain fragments meeting the trash can. Each sound pressed against my skin. I wanted to help, but couldn't make myself cross the space. I knew if I moved too quickly, the quiet might shatter again. He exhaled long and heavy and left the room. The sound of his boots faded down the hallway, up the stairs, a door closing overhead, then nothing. Just the hum of the refrigerator returning to life. I stayed where I was, eyes fixed on the sunlight striping the tile. My mother stood by the sink, staring out the window towel clutched in her hands. Her shoulders trembled once, then steadied. "Go," she whispered. "Just go get ready." I nodded even though she couldn't see me. As I walked toward the stairs, the floor felt uneven, not broken, but altered. Every creak sounded like memory setting itself in place. My heartbeat finally slowed, but the rhythm stayed wrong, half a beat late. At the landing, I looked back. The chair was still there, toppled harmless now. My mother had turned her back to it, washing her hands as though she could rinse away sound. I went upstairs, closed my door, and pressed my forehead against the cool wood. My breath came in short bursts. The quiet room felt too small to contain the noise still ringing in my ears. I whispered to the emptiness, "It's over." But it wasn't. Not really. The blow wasn't a single sound or moment. It was the realization that peace here only existed in the pauses between storms. I straightened slowly, catching my reflection in the mirror. Eyes, wide, hair, tangled face, pale. I looked like someone I might pity if she weren't me. "Keep moving," I told her. "Get through today." Downstairs, the refrigerator door closed. The hum stopped again. I waited for the next sound, but none came. Only that still humming silence that was louder than anything else. When the house finally went quiet, it was a kind of quiet that hurt the ears. I stood in the bathroom staring at myself in the mirror while the faucet ran the water, too hot steam fogging the glass until my reflection blurred into nothing. The side of my neck throbbed, my shoulder tight and stiff, but I didn't touch it. I just watched the fog move and tried to breathe like a normal person. "He throws." "I absorb," I whispered, and the words felt rehearsed as if I'd been saying them all my life without ever speaking them out loud. Downstairs, the floor creaked again, his weight, his presence, but then the sound faded. I waited, listening for another outburst that never came. The silence after chaos is the cruelest part. It makes you question if anything happened at all. I splashed cold water on my face, rubbed my temples, forced my breathing to match the rhythm of the dripping faucet. I wanted to cry, but couldn't find the energy. The tears felt like a luxury for people who were safe enough to fall apart. I needed to move, needed to leave, before courage dissolved into fear again. My blazer hung limp on the back of the chair, still stained with coffee, smelling faintly burnt. I tried to wipe it clean, but the mark spread darker. It didn't matter. I put it on anyway, each button trembling under my fingers. From the hallway, my mother's voice called softly, "Claire, maybe stay home today." Her tone wasn't caring. It was protective of him, not me. I didn't answer. I walked past her without meeting her eyes. "He didn't mean it," she said as I reached for my bag. The words made me pause. "He never means it, but he always does it," I said quietly, not turning around. She flinched but didn't argue. The morning sun had risen higher, flooding the kitchen with too much light, like the universe had decided to expose every flaw in the room. The chair still lay on its side, one leg splintered. My father's footsteps sounded upstairs, slow, measured, as if nothing unusual had occurred. My mother picked up the pieces of the broken mug, hands careful, eyes vacant. I stepped past her, opened the front door, and let the heat hit my face. It smelled like cut grass and gasoline. I walked fast, my heartbeat keeping time with the clicking of my shoes on the concrete. By the time I reached the corner, my pulse steadied. I didn't look back. At the bus stop, I tried to rehearse my answers again, but the words came out shaky. "Tell us about yourself." My voice broke on the first word. I stopped, closed my eyes, counted to 5. The bus arrived, brakes hissing. I climbed aboard, avoiding the driver's gaze. The seats smelled of vinyl and dust, the kind of neutral scent that felt mercifully impersonal. I sat near the back, pressed my folder flat against my knees. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. I watched neighborhoods pass through the window, familiar lawns, the grocery store where my mother bought milk every Tuesday, the small park where Amber used to play. Each place looked ordinary, untouched by the war zone that was our kitchen. People waited at crosswalks, dogs tugged leashes, cars idled in driveways. The world didn't care, didn't even slow down. I envied its indifference. Downtown glass buildings reflected the sunlight like mirrors designed to blind. The closer the bus got, the more I rehearsed lines in my head. Strength, composure, professionalism. The mask I needed to wear. When the driver announced the stop, I stood too quickly, caught myself, and thanked him out of habit. The sidewalks buzzed with energy heels, clicking horns, honking voices blending into city rhythm. I tried to let that rhythm carry me to pretend I was just another young woman, late for an interview, not someone running from a storm. Inside the building, cool air hit my skin, sharp and sterile. The receptionist smiled politely. "Appointment name?" she asked. "Claire Donovan," I said. My voice sounded foreign, thinner than usual. She nodded and handed me a visitor badge. "You can wait in the lobby." I sat clutching the folder so tightly the edges dug into my palms. The wall clock ticked above the elevator doors. I wanted to appear calm, but the tapping of my shoe betrayed me. When the recruiter arrived, she looked kind but distracted. "Sorry for the wait," she said. "Let's head upstairs." The interview room was bright, full of reflective surfaces. I hated that I could see myself from every angle. The recruiter asked the first question, and I stumbled halfway through my answer. She smiled politely, waiting. I started over, voice steadier, but the rhythm was off. Halfway through, the man beside her tapped his pen on the table. 1, 2, 3 beats. The sound shot through me like a trigger. My hands went cold, my breath caught. For a second, I wasn't in that room. I was back in the kitchen hearing something scrape against tile. The memory swallowed the present whole. "Claire," the woman said gently. I blinked, forced a smile. "Sorry." Long morning. The rest of the interview blurred into autopilot. I answered what I could, guessed what I couldn't. When it ended, I thanked them and walked out, legs heavy, throat dry. I didn't remember taking the elevator down, only the sudden rush of outdoor heat and the realization that my hands were still shaking. At a nearby cafe, I sat for a long time, staring at my reflection in the window. The woman looking back at me had a smudge of coffee on her sleeve and something darker behind her eyes. My phone buzzed a new email. I opened it, heart racing, already expecting the rejection. It came faster than I imagined. "Thank you for your time. We've decided to move forward with other candidates." The words blurred, rearranging themselves into failure. I wanted to laugh at the timing, at the absurdity of trying to hold a normal life together with hands still trembling from survival. I closed the email, turned off my phone, and pressed my forehead to the cool glass of the cafe window. Outside, people walked by, sipping drinks, laughing. Living inside worlds where morning still meant safety. I envied them, but I also envied myself for still being here. The day stretched on, relentless and bright, as if daring me to give up. I didn't. I stood, adjusted my ruined blazer, and walked toward the bus stop again, the city noise filling the hollow spaces where fear used to live. I used to think control was the same as love. That's how he taught it. When I was 9, he told me I couldn't go to the art fair with my friends because those things fill your head with nonsense. I cried, clutching the painting I'd made in class, a mess of colors that didn't mean anything to anyone but me. He took it from my hand, said, "You'll thank me later," and tore it clean in half. The sound of paper ripping has never left my memory. That was the first time I understood that in our house, joy had to be earned through obedience. The next day, he made me sit at the dining table for 3 hours, rewriting multiplication tables until my wrist cramped, telling me discipline is how you show love back. I nodded because arguing meant dinner would vanish and silence would last for days. My mother said nothing that night, just placed a glass of milk by my elbow and whispered, "Do what he says, it's easier." And she was right, it was easier, but it was never living. By the time I was 15, I could predict his moods by the sound of the front door. A soft close meant calm. A slam meant war. I'd wait at the top of the stairs, ear pressed against the railing, listening to the way his keys hit the table. If they clattered, I knew to disappear into my room. He liked control the way some people liked wine. Slow, indulgent, something to savor. It wasn't about violence. It was about seeing how much silence he could command. He called it keeping order. He said families needed rules, structure, hierarchy. What he meant was obedience, fear, and the illusion of respect. Even now, years later, I can hear the cadence of his lectures. People out there won't tolerate weakness. I'm doing you a favor. He always framed cruelty as generosity. I learned early that arguing with him was like arguing with gravity. You could fight, but you'd still fall. When I went to college, my first week away felt like stepping onto another planet. No one knocked down doors. No one called my name like a threat. Freedom was so quiet, it scared me. The first time I overslept and missed class, I woke in a panic, waiting for someone to shout. No one did. I lay there for a long time, realizing that freedom wasn't loud, it was the absence of footsteps. I started to collect small proofs that my life was my own, a bookshelf arranged the way I wanted, an alarm set to my schedule, a fridge with food I chose. But control has a way of following you home. Every phone call from him was a test. You sound tired, he'd say. You're not wasting time with friends, are you? Remember why you're there. And I'd laugh, pretending it was endearing advice instead of surveillance disguised as concern. After graduation, when I couldn't find a job right away, he said, "You see, I warned you about chasing dreams. You should have taken the office job I lined up. I told him I wanted to earn it myself." His reply was simple, "Then you'll fail yourself." I thought about those words when I got the interview email last week. It felt like a small rebellion to keep it secret from him. I wanted to walk into that office on my own merit, come home with proof that his control wasn't destiny. The night before the interview, while ironing my blazer, I remembered another night years ago in high school when he'd found my sketchbook under the bed. He flipped through it silently, page after page of drawings I'd hidden for months. Then he asked, "What is this supposed to be?" "Just sketches." I said, my voice small. "You think this will pay your bills?" He dropped it in the trash and said, "Dreams don't feed you. Discipline does." I didn't draw again for 5 years. I replaced pencils with spreadsheets, canvases with resumes. Control became a language I spoke fluently without realizing it. Even now, when someone raises their voice, my body reacts before my mind does. Shoulders tense, heart races, silence becomes armor. It's muscle memory built from survival. After the interview failed, I walked home replaying that old conditioning in my head. The need to fix things, to apologize, even when the fault wasn't mine. That's the most dangerous part of growing up under control. You start policing yourself for them. You start asking for permission to exist. I thought of my mother's face at the kitchen sink, the way she looked out the window every time he shouted, as if freedom might appear in the yard if she stared long enough. I used to hate her for it. Now I just understand exhaustion. Maybe she believed endurance was the only kind of rebellion allowed. But endurance is just survival stretched into years. Sitting on the bus that afternoon, I realized how much of me still belonged to him. The hesitation, the constant need to explain, the instinct to shrink. Control doesn't end when the shouting stops. It ends when you stop believing you deserve it. I stared out the window at the city lights beginning to flicker on, thinking about the girl I used to be, the one who believed torn paintings were lessons and silence was safety. I wanted to tell her she wasn't weak for wanting peace. She was human. I wanted to tell her that love shouldn't feel like strategy, that kindness isn't earned through fear. The bus turned down my street, and the world outside blurred into color and motion. Somewhere between the stops, I promised myself something small but solid. The next time control reached for me, I'd move first. No more waiting for permission to be free. I stepped off the bus and into the cooling dusk, the air thick with the smell of rain about to start. For the first time in years, I didn't flinch at the sound of doors closing behind me. The email came that night while I was sitting on the edge of my bed, the glow of my laptop painting the room in cold light. I'd spent the last hour rereading the rejection message from the interview, letting each word bruise a little deeper, as if pain might turn into motivation if I looked at it long enough. When the notification pinged, I almost ignored it, expecting another spam alert or payment reminder. But the subject line stopped me. "Are you okay?" it said from someone named Olivia Grant. For a moment, I couldn't place the name. Then I remembered the woman who sat near the window during my interview, the one with kind eyes and a silver watch that caught the light whenever she gestured. She wasn't the recruiter, just part of the panel, quiet but observant. I clicked the email. "Hi, Claire. I know this is unusual, but I wanted to reach out. I was in your interview earlier today. You seemed distracted, maybe even shaken. I don't mean to intrude, but I recognized the look. If something happened, I want you to know I've been there. You don't owe me an explanation, but you're not alone." I read it twice, the words settling heavy and unfamiliar. Not alone. It had been years since anyone said that to me. I hesitated, fingers hovering above the keyboard, unsure if replying would make me look unprofessional or desperate. Then I typed, "Thank you for noticing. It's been a hard day. I appreciate your kindness." I hovered again, debating whether to add more to explain, but then I hit send before I could second guess. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered without thinking. "Claire." A woman's voice said, warm, cautious. "It's Olivia. I hope it's okay that I called. You left your number on your resume." I didn't know what to say. "Yeah," I whispered. "It's okay." There was a pause on the line, filled with the hum of distant traffic. "You don't have to tell me anything," she said, "but if you want to talk, I'll listen." Something in her tone, the way she didn't rush me, cracked the wall I'd built. The words tumbled out quiet at first, then faster. I told her about the morning, about the chair, about walking out anyway. I didn't cry until I reached the part about the interview, how I'd frozen when the pen tapped on the table. "That sound," I said. I thought I was past reacting to things like that. Olivia didn't interrupt. She let the silence hold the way someone does when they've lived inside the same kind. "You're not broken," she said finally. "You're conditioned. There's a difference." My throat tightened. "You sound like you've done this before," I said. "I have," she replied. 5 years ago, I left my husband. I stayed at a shelter for 3 months. I thought control was love too. It took me years to unlearn it. I didn't know what to say, so I said the only thing that felt true. "How did you start over?" She exhaled softly. "One decision at a time. First, I told someone the truth. Then I documented everything. Every call, every text, every lie he told to make me look unstable. Facts protect you when emotions can't." The word "documented" stuck in my head like a lifeline. "You think I should—" "Only if you're ready," she said. "But if he's already tried to sabotage you once, he'll do it again. People like that don't stop until someone makes them face consequences." Consequences. It felt foreign, almost mythic. In my family, consequences only traveled downward. I wouldn't even know where to start, I admitted. "I do," she said. "If you want, I can show you. There are ethical boards, compliance departments, even community networks that help report harassment quietly. No one has to know it's you." For the first time all day, the weight in my chest shifted. "Why are you helping me?" I asked. "Because someone once helped me," she said simply. "And because I saw something in you today I used to see in myself the moment before a person decides they're done being afraid." Her words made my eyes sting. I pressed my hand to my mouth to keep from sobbing out loud. "Thank you," I whispered. "You don't owe me anything," she said. "Just promise me you'll keep notes, even if you never use them." "I will," I said, though I wasn't sure yet. "Good. And Claire." "Yeah, don't let shame keep you quiet. Silence protects them, not you." The line stayed open a while after that, neither of us speaking, just the faint echo of our breathing sinking across miles. When she finally said goodbye, the room felt less suffocating. I lay back on the bed, phone still in my hand, staring at the ceiling. Outside, rain had started tapping against the window, gentle, steady, like the world exhaling. I closed my eyes and let the sound wash over me. It didn't erase the day, but it dulled its edges. Before sleep pulled me under, I opened my notebook from college, the one I used to fill with job applications and rejection lists. I flipped to a blank page and wrote the date. Then, in small, neat letters, I wrote, "He said it was my fault." It wasn't. Underneath that, another line, "Document everything." I stared at the words until the ink began to blur from the moisture gathering at the corner of my eyes. It wasn't sadness exactly. It was release, the first exhale after years of holding breath. When I finally turned off the light, the rain still played its soft percussion against the glass, and for the first time in as long as I could remember, I slept without waiting for footsteps in the hall. The next morning, I woke to the pale gray light of a sky, still deciding whether to rain again. For a few seconds, I forgot where I was. The quiet felt too heavy, too deliberate. Then the ache in my shoulder reminded me. The phone on the nightstand buzzed a message from Olivia Morning Claire. Remember facts, not fear. Start small. I stared at the words, the simplicity of them. Facts, not fear. It sounded like a language I didn't yet speak. Still, I opened my notebook, flipped past the line I'd written the night before, and began. Date, time, description. I wrote everything I remembered: the chair, the coffee mug, the words that came after. Each line steadied me a little. It was strange recording the things I'd spent my life trying to forget, but writing them down made them real in a way that didn't crush me. It turned chaos into evidence. Proof that it wasn't just bad moods or family tension. It was a pattern. I downloaded a voice memo app Olivia had suggested and tested it by recording the sound of rain outside my window. The file saved instantly, a small red dot blinking. That dot felt like a shield. I didn't have a plan yet, only the first steps: collect, preserve, breathe. When my phone rang, I jumped. Unknown number again, but the area code was local. I hesitated, then answered. Claire Donovan, a woman asked briskly. This is HR from Calder Tech. We received a reference call from someone claiming to be your father. My heart sank. What did he say? He implied you were emotionally unstable and that hiring you might expose the company to risk. He used his position at the chamber board as a reference point. My mouth went dry. That's not true, I said. Of course not, she replied. But you might want to be aware in case he tries elsewhere. I'll note the incident internally. I managed to thank her before hanging up. My hands shook so violently I had to set the phone down. He hadn't just humiliated me, he was trying to erase me professionally. I texted Olivia immediately. He's calling companies. HR confirmed. She called within seconds. Did you record that? No, I said. It was just a call. Then write it down. Time, date, name of HR rep. You'll need it. For what I asked. For later. Trust me. Her calm voice anchored me. And Claire, check your voicemail. If he called them, he might have left messages elsewhere too. I did. There were 3 new voicemails. The first was blank static. The second, his voice strained but recognizable. You think you can run from this family? You're going to embarrass us. I'll make sure no one touches your name in this city again. I played it twice, recorded it onto the app through speakerphone, and saved the file. When I renamed it Threat 1, my stomach turned, but also a strange strength rose in me. Each file, each note was a small rebellion. That evening, I sat at the kitchen table of my tiny apartment surrounded by evidence that felt both horrifying and liberating: screenshots of messages, saved voicemails, scribbled notes in pen. I had turned fear into data. Olivia guided me over the phone step by step. Now you'll send it to a secure email. Not yet public, just backed up. Then we draft a timeline. I typed while she spoke. January 1st verbal threat. March interference with interview. May voicemail to HR. It doesn't have to be perfect, she said. Just enough to show a pattern. As the list grew, I began to see my life like a report, each incident linked to the next by his need for control. For years, I'd believed I was the problem. The evidence said otherwise. Around midnight, Olivia said softly, You're doing good work, Claire. Most people never get this far. I don't feel brave, I admitted. You don't need to feel it. You just need to act it. Her voice carried that quiet authority of someone who'd already walked through her own fire. After we hung up, I replayed one of the recordings, listening to his voice not as a daughter, but as a witness. It no longer sounded like thunder. It sounded like proof. The next day, I took another step. I called the ethics compliance hotline Olivia had mentioned. The representative's voice was polite, professional. You can file an anonymous report if you wish, she said. Do you have documentation? Yes, I said, and the word felt like armor. I followed her instructions, uploaded files, wrote a statement. Each click of the mouse was a heartbeat steady and deliberate. When I finished, I sat back and stared at the confirmation number on the screen. It looked small, meaningless, but I knew it wasn't. It was the first official record of what he'd done, something that couldn't be gaslit away. That afternoon, I took a walk around the block. The air was humid, the kind that makes every movement slow, but inside, I felt lighter. For once, I didn't flinch when a car door slammed. I went to a cafe, ordered tea, and opened my notebook. The last page was filled with check marks, each one a piece of control taken back. Collect evidence, record everything, file report. I was supposed to feel afraid, maybe even guilty, but what I felt instead was focus. The world had reduced to a single purpose: stop him before he destroyed anyone else. When my phone buzzed again, it was another unknown number. This time, I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, the notification appeared. I hesitated, then pressed play. His voice, slower now, edged with frustration. "You're making a mistake, Claire. You don't bite the hand that built you. You'll regret this." I recorded it too. I didn't tremble. I saved the file as Threat 2. Then I wrote in my notebook, pattern confirmed. That night, as I sat by the window watching the city lights flicker on, a realization settled deep in me. I wasn't just defending myself anymore. I was building a case. Not for revenge, not yet, but for truth. And truth, I realized, could be louder than anger if you collected enough of it. The fear was still there, humming under my skin, but it had a purpose now. It was energy waiting to be used. Somewhere between the rustle of traffic and the soft ping of another saved recording, I understood what Olivia had meant. Facts, not fear. For the first time, I believed her. A week later, the story broke quietly at first, like a rumor too small to notice. Someone forwarded me an article from the local business journal with the headline, "Chamber Board Member Under Internal Review for Ethics Complaint." There was no name yet, just initials and vague references to inappropriate interference with professional recruitment. But I knew. The details were too precise, the timing, the language about harassment through external communication. My phone buzzed nonstop that morning, friends from college sending messages that began with, "Is this your dad?" and ended with, "I'm so sorry." I didn't reply. I just sat on my couch staring at the screen, the words flickering like a mirage. I had imagined this moment 100 times, but never thought it would actually happen. When Olivia called, she didn't sound surprised. "It's starting," she said. They wouldn't publish anything unless the investigation confirmed enough evidence. "So they believed me?" I asked, still disbelieving. "They believed the proof," she said gently. "That's the beauty of evidence. It doesn't need to be liked to be true." That afternoon, the article updated. This time, it included his full name, Martin Donovan. My father. The headline changed too. Board member suspended pending harassment review. Seeing his name printed beside those words was like watching a monument crack. For years, he had built his identity on reputation, on polished introductions, and the power of being known. Now that very recognition was what undid him. I expected to feel victorious, but what I felt was strange, hollow relief. The phone rang again, my mother's number. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. "Claire," she said, voice thin and trembling. "What did you do?" I told the truth. I said. "You destroyed him," she whispered. "No," I said quietly. "He did that himself." She started to cry, the kind of cry that wasn't sadness but disbelief that the old rules no longer worked. "You don't understand what you've done to this family." "Mom," I said, "maybe it's time someone did something to this family." She hung up without replying. The silence after was almost peaceful. That evening, I went to Olivia's office, the small HR branch where she worked. She greeted me with coffee and a smile that carried both empathy and pride. "You're officially untouchable now," she said. The complaint was verified, the recordings matched his number, and the board voted to suspend him pending a full hearing. Will he lose everything I asked? Probably not everything, she said, but enough to matter, enough to make him face what he's done. I looked out the window at the city below, cars streaming through intersections like veins of light. "I thought I'd feel stronger," I said. "Instead, I just feel tired." That's what freedom feels like at first, she said. It's quiet because the noise has finally stopped. The next morning, the local news picked up the story. They ran a segment with old photos of him shaking hands at fundraisers, cutting ribbons at community events. The anchor's voice was polite but firm. Sources indicate that the board member made threatening calls to potential employers of his adult daughter, allegedly attempting to sabotage her job prospects. They blurred my name, but anyone who knew us could connect the dots. My inbox filled with messages, some supportive, some cruel. "How could you do this to your father?" one said. "Finally, someone stood up to him," said another. I didn't reply to any of them. The world was talking, and for once, I didn't need to explain myself. That afternoon, I saw him. I was leaving a cafe when his car pulled up across the street. He looked smaller somehow. His posture bent his face older than I remembered. He didn't shout. He just stared at me through the open window eyes, dark and glassy. "You think you won?" he said, voice low enough that only I could hear. "You ruined your own blood. You ruined your own name," I said. His expression flickered shock, then anger, then something like fear. "You'll regret this," he said. I stepped closer to the curb. "No, Dad," I said. "You will." He drove off, tires hissing against wet pavement. I stood there a long time after he was gone, the rain beginning to fall again, soaking through my jacket. It didn't feel cleansing. It felt real. The next few days unfolded like a slow unspooling. The chamber issued a formal statement confirming his suspension and launched an external ethics review. His employer followed suit, releasing a terse memo. Mr. Donovan's conduct violated internal codes of professional integrity. They terminated his consulting contract effective immediately. Every paper in town ran a variation of the same headline. "Respected advisor, faces misconduct allegations." Respect. That word used to define him. Now it was the thing he had to beg for. My sister texted once, "I hope you're happy. You killed our family's name." I didn't respond. There was no family name left to kill, only the truth finally printed where everyone could see it. A week later, a formal letter arrived at my apartment. It was from the same HR department that had once rejected me. They were reopening my application. "Your interview performance was noted as promising under difficult circumstances. We'd like to offer you a second meeting." I stared at the letter until my eyes blurred. Difficult circumstances. They had no idea. I called Olivia, my voice shaking. "They want me back." "Of course they do," she said. "You earned it twice, once by showing up, once by standing up." I laughed, the sound cracked, but real. "I don't know if I can walk into another building without thinking about that morning." "Then don't think about it," she said. "Think about every morning after." The second interview was quiet, professional, and oddly calm. I answered confidently, smiled when appropriate, and left before doubt could catch up. 2 days later, I got the job offer. I signed it immediately, no hesitation. That night, I walked downtown just to feel the city breathing around me. I passed a newsstand with his face on the front page, half shadowed by the headline. For the first time, I didn't look away. I bought a copy, folded it neatly, and tucked it into my bag, not as a trophy, but as proof that stories can end differently when you stop letting fear write them. When I got home, there were new voicemails waiting. My mother again, voice breaking. "Claire, he's lost everything. He doesn't know what to do. Please just talk to him." I deleted it. Another one followed his voice this time, thin and desperate. "We can fix this. Come home." I deleted that one too. I sat at my small kitchen table, the one that came secondhand from a thrift store, and opened my notebook. At the bottom of the last page, under all the evidence and dates, I wrote 2 words. Case closed. I closed the notebook and let the silence settle. It wasn't the kind that used to scare me. This silence was mine. The city outside hummed with life, and for the first time, the noise didn't drown me. It joined me. My phone buzzed again, one more message from Olivia. "You okay?" I typed back. "Better than okay. Free." She replied with a single word. "Finally." I smiled, leaned back in my chair, and listened to the sound of rain against the window. It no longer reminded me of fear. It sounded like applause. The new apartment was small, barely 600 square feet, but to me, it felt endless. The first night I moved in, I sat on the bare floor and just listened to the silence. Not the heavy silence of my parents' house that came after shouting, but a quiet that asked nothing of me. The walls were white, the windows faced west, and when the sun set, it painted everything gold. I didn't own much, just a thrifted couch, a folding table, and a chair that didn't wobble. I assembled it myself, tightening every screw like it was an act of defiance. For days, I lived inside that stillness, learning what it meant to exist without bracing for impact. The first morning I woke before my alarm. For a second instinct told me to listen for footsteps, for the thud of a door, for someone calling my name in anger. None came. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator and the birds outside. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, the steam curling into the air, and realized this was the first time in years I'd tasted something without associating it with tension. The tea was bitter grounding. I let it cool between my hands. Healing, I discovered, wasn't cinematic. It was slow, repetitive, 100 small choices to stop living in reaction to someone else's moods. Every time I caught myself apologizing to no one, I took a breath instead. Every time I jumped at a loud noise, I reminded myself, "You're safe now." Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. On the third night, thunder rolled across the sky loud enough to shake the windows. My body froze before my brain caught up. I dropped the mug I was holding and it shattered. I stood there staring at the pieces on the floor, heartbeat, racing hands trembling until I forced myself to kneel and gather them slowly. "It's just a sound," I whispered, repeating it until the words felt true. The storm passed, and I sat by the window watching the rain. Each drop streaked down the glass like a reminder that things fall, things break, and still the world keeps moving. The next day, Olivia came over with takeout boxes and a plant she said was impossible to kill. "For your new space," she said, placing it by the window. "Something alive to remind you you're allowed to be." I laughed softly. "You think I'll keep it alive? I think you already have," she said. We ate on the floor, the food lukewarm, the conversation easy. She asked how I was adjusting, and I said, "It feels strange not to be scared." She nodded. "Freedom does at first. You've been living in fight mode so long that peace feels wrong." "When does it stop feeling wrong?" I asked. "When you stop expecting it to be taken away," she said. That night after she left, I turned off all the lights and sat in the dark, letting her words sink in. Through the window, the city glowed a pulse of headlights and distant sirens, a rhythm that no longer scared me. I took out my notebook again, the same one filled with evidence and memories. On a new page, I wrote 3 things: apartment lease signed, job accepted, fear not permanent. I underlined the last line twice. The days that followed blurred together in quiet ways. Work training, grocery runs, emails that began with "welcome aboard." My new coworkers didn't know my history. They just saw someone who showed up early and stayed late. Sometimes during meetings when someone raised their voice in enthusiasm, my muscles still tensed, but the reaction faded faster each time. Healing wasn't linear, but it was measurable. Every night before bed, I sat on my sturdy new chair, the one I built, and took 5 slow breaths. It became a ritual. Inhale safety, exhale memory. The chair creaked a little under me, and somehow that imperfection made it perfect. One evening, while rearranging files, I found the newspaper clipping of my father's suspension. I stared at it for a long time, half expecting it to hurt. It didn't. The ink had faded slightly, the paper soft from being folded so often. I tore it into small pieces and flushed them down the sink, watching them swirl away. That chapter was gone. I wasn't pretending it never happened. I was just refusing to let it live rent-free in my mind. Outside, the air smelled of rain again. I opened the window and let it in. Somewhere below, someone laughed, and the sound rose up through the night like proof that the world could still be kind. I thought about the girl I used to be crouched in the hallway waiting for calm. I wanted to tell her that someday she'd have a place where no one shouted her name, where the only thing breaking would be a mug on accident, not her spirit. The clock on the wall ticked softly, steady, unthreatening. I turned off the lamp and whispered, "You're safe now." This time I believed it. It took months before I could call it peace without flinching. Some mornings I still woke before dawn, convinced I'd hear his voice or the creak of the old hallway outside my room, but the only sound was the wind brushing against the window and the soft hum of the city below. Healing had reshaped time itself. Everything felt slower now, deliberate, as though life was asking permission to enter. One Saturday, I sat by the window with my laptop and finally wrote the email I had been drafting in my head for weeks. Dear Olivia, I never thanked you properly. You gave me more than advice, you gave me a map out of a life I thought I was trapped in. Because of you, I learned that bravery isn't loud. Sometimes it's the decision to stay quiet long enough to think clearly. I wanted you to know I'm okay. I paused, then added, You once said freedom feels wrong at first. It doesn't anymore. I hit send and leaned back, watching sunlight crawl slowly across the floor. The air smelled like coffee and the faint sweetness of the plant she'd given me still alive, somehow green leaves stretching toward the glass. I thought about all the years I had mistaken endurance for love, silence for peace, and fear for respect. He taught me to fear silence. She taught me to fill it with truth. Those words echoed in my mind like a prayer. I no longer wanted revenge. I wanted understanding, the kind that doesn't excuse but clarifies. My father's world had collapsed, but mine had begun. I didn't need to see him punished anymore. The absence of his control was punishment enough. The job settled into routine. I learned to trust small things again, the sound of laughter that didn't mean mockery, a closed door that didn't mean anger, the way people apologized and meant it. Each time someone raised their voice in the office, my chest tightened, but I learned to breathe through it, to remind myself that not every loud sound belonged to the past. Progress looked ordinary: dishes in the sink, folded laundry weekend plans that didn't involve apologies. One evening, while walking home from work, I passed a furniture store window and stopped. There was a wooden chair displayed there, sturdy and simple, nothing like the ones from my parents' house. I walked in without thinking. The salesman smiled, asked if I was looking for something specific. Yes, I said. Something that lasts. I bought it, carried it home myself, and placed it by the window. That night, I sat on it for hours, reading, writing, breathing. It creaked slightly the way wood does when it settles into a new space, and I smiled. Every imperfection sounded like freedom. I thought about my mother sometimes, how she'd lived her entire life under his shadow, mistaking survival for loyalty. I didn't hate her anymore. I just hoped that one day she'd understand that obedience isn't love that she deserved, quiet that didn't hurt. I'd stopped expecting an apology from either of them. I didn't need it. I had my own closure, a small apartment, a steady paycheck, a name untangled from his reputation. The first time my boss praised me in a meeting, I felt tears prick my eyes for reasons no one else could have understood. Validation without fear felt almost divine. Later that week, I printed my offer letter and pinned it inside my closet right next to the notebook page where I had once written, "He said it was my fault." It wasn't. I didn't frame it for anyone else to see. It was a quiet reminder of where I'd been and where I refused to return. On the anniversary of that morning, I took the day off work. I woke early, brewed coffee, and sat on the balcony watching the city stretch awake. A train whistle echoed in the distance, low and steady. The sound no longer made me tense, it made me curious. I opened my journal and wrote, "I used to think survival was enough. Now I want joy." The words looked strange on the page, but right. Joy felt possible not because everything was fixed, but because I had stopped waiting for permission to feel it. I looked around the room at the life I had built, modest but real, and whispered, "You made it." For the first time, I wasn't saying it to convince myself. I was saying it because it was true. I used to think stories like mine should end in silence, that the best kind of survival was invisibility. But healing changes how you see everything. Now, when I look back, I don't see tragedy. I see proof. Proof that you can step out of the narrative someone else wrote for you and start your own without asking permission. Some nights I still sit by the window, city lights flickering across my skin, and I talk to the version of me that lived inside that house. I tell her she did everything right by leaving. I tell her she didn't overreact, didn't ruin anything, didn't owe anyone forgiveness they never asked for. And if you're reading this or hearing my voice somewhere across the glow of a screen, maybe you need to hear it too. If someone ever told you to stay quiet for peace, don't. Peace built on fear isn't peace at all. It's paralysis dressed as love. Real peace is loud inside your chest. It's messy and alive, and it doesn't ask for permission to exist. When I first walked out of that house, I thought I'd lost my family. But what I really lost was the version of me that believed love had to hurt. I used to think freedom was a destination. It's not. It's a decision you make every single day, the decision to choose yourself without guilt. I still remember the sound of that morning, the mug shattering the air going silent, my heartbeat racing like a trapped bird. For years, that sound haunted me. Now it reminds me of the moment I began, because that was the first time I didn't back down. That was the day I stopped being silent. I tell this story not because I want pity, but because I want connection. Somewhere out there, someone is sitting in their car staring at a text message from a parent wondering if they're crazy for wanting distance. Someone is holding a phone hesitating to make a call that could change everything. Someone is wiping away tears quietly because they've been told crying makes them weak. I want them to know they're not weak, they're awake. And that's the most dangerous thing a controlled person can become awake. I didn't think anyone would care when I started documenting the truth. I didn't expect an ally or justice or even understanding. But what I learned is this: when you tell the truth long enough, it becomes impossible to bury. Lies depend on silence. Truth only needs one voice brave enough to stay steady. That's how cycles break, not with explosions, but with persistence. People sometimes ask if I've forgiven him. Forgiveness to me isn't a gift for the person who caused the harm. It's a door you unlock so you can keep walking. I'm not sure if I've opened it all the way yet, but I've stopped standing outside it. I don't wish him pain. I just wish him reflection. And I hope in whatever quiet house he sits in now that he finally understands what his silence cost him. Sometimes healing means never getting the apology, but learning you never needed it to move forward. These days, I work in HR compliance, the same field that saved me. It's strange, I know, but every time I read a report about workplace harassment or family interference, I think of Olivia and how one person's compassion can change the trajectory of someone else's life. I make sure every caller hears the same words: she told me facts, not fear. I keep her plant by my desk. It's bigger now, the leaves stretching wide toward the light. A coworker once asked how I keep it alive. I smiled and said, "Consistency and attention, things I used to mistake for control." When I clock out at the end of the day, I don't dread the walk home. I look forward to it. The streets are busy, but they don't scare me anymore. Every passing car, every honk, every burst of laughter is just proof that life goes on whether or not you hide. I get home, set down my bag, and sit in my chair, the one I built myself. Sometimes I run my hand over the grain of the wood and remember the day he said I'd never make it without him. Then I look around at the walls I painted, the job I earned, the peace I built, and I whisper, "Look, Dad, I did." He once threw a chair at me. Now I sit on one, the one I earned. There's poetry in that, I think. Full circle. When I tell people my story, they often ask how I found the courage to leave. The truth is, courage doesn't appear out of nowhere. It grows in secret, watered by every small decision you make to protect your own soul. Courage is the whisper that says, "Not today," every time fear tries to reclaim you. It's the email you send, the phone call you answer, the bag you pack, the step you take out the door. You don't have to feel brave to be brave. You just have to move. And if my story reaches you somewhere, whether you're in a kitchen filled with noise or a quiet apartment filled with questions, know that you have the right to move too. You have the right to say no more and mean it. You have the right to rebuild even if no one claps for you. You have the right to outgrow the version of yourself that kept you small for their comfort. And when you finally step into your own light, don't apologize for shining. If you're still reading, I want you to do something for me. Look around wherever you are. Take one deep breath. Inhale what's real. Exhale what they taught you to fear. Then tell me where you're watching, from what time it is where you are, because stories like this don't belong to one person. They belong to anyone who's ever had to start over. Every comment, every message, every shared story is another light in the dark, another proof that silence doesn't win when truth is spoken out loud. My name is Claire Donovan. I'm 31 years old. I live in a small apartment in Austin, Texas, with a chair by the window and a plant that refuses to die. My life is quiet now, not empty, but peaceful. And if you've ever wondered whether you'll make it out of your own story alive, I'm here to tell you, you will. Maybe not today, maybe not easily, but you will. You'll make it, and when you do, you'll understand what I finally learned. Freedom isn't the absence of fear. It's the refusal to let fear be in charge. So if you see yourself in my story, don't stay silent. Tell yours, because someone else is waiting for the sound of your truth to remind them they're not alone. Have you ever been told to stay quiet just to keep the peace? Have you ever swallowed your own truth so someone else could stay comfortable? If you have, then you already know what I felt that morning, the trembling, the guilt, the silence that eats away at your soul until you forget the sound of your own voice. But here's what they never tell you. Peace built on silence isn't peace at all. It's slow self-erasure. And when you finally decide to speak, people will call it betrayal because they mistake obedience for love. Maybe you've been there. Maybe you've walked on eggshells so long that even solid ground feels suspicious. Maybe you've apologized for things that were never your fault. Or maybe you're still in the middle of it right now, still debating whether your pain is valid enough to be named. I want you to know it is. Your story matters even if no one believes it yet. Healing doesn't always look like victory. Sometimes it looks like survival with your spine still intact. I used to think walking away made me cold. Now I know it made me alive. And if you're standing at the edge of your own decision wondering if it's worth it, listen carefully, it is. It's worth the loneliness, the tears, the nights where you second-guess everything. Because one morning you'll wake up, take a deep breath, and realize the world hasn't ended. It's just beginning again, this time on your terms. Maybe your version of the chair isn't made of wood. Maybe it's a slammed door, an unanswered call, or a letter you never send. Whatever it is, remember this, the moment you choose not to flinch anymore, you've already won. If my story found you tonight, don't let it fade when the video ends. Tell me where you're watching, from what time it is, and what silence you're breaking free from. Because when one person tells the truth, it gives permission to thousands more. Drop A if you've ever had to start over. Drop A if you've ever realized you deserved better. And if you're still finding your voice, stay. You belong here. This isn't just a story, it's a mirror. You don't have to stay in the dark to protect people who never protected you. You don't have to earn peace. You build it one choice at a time. My name is Claire, and this is my truth. What's yours? Tell me below. Tell the world. Tell yourself. And never let anyone steal the sound of your freedom again.